Damian Hughes. My name is Damian Hughes. I am the project manager for Neighborhood Library Services, and I am one of the co-chairs for the DEI Council. For today's session, please use the Q&A feature to submit questions for the presenters. You can find the button at the bottom of your screen below the slides. Throughout the presentation, your questions may be addressed. There is an option to ask your question anonymously, and they will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Feel free to interact otherwise with other attendees and presenters using the chat function. We will be monitoring throughout, and we love to see your comments. Closed captioning is enabled and available. Now I would like to turn it over to our presenters, Mariette Largesse, Colleen Quinn, and Renee Brown of the University of Maryland Global Campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Damian. Colleen, if you want to share.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can see the presentation.
Alrighty. I guess we should introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm Mariette Largesse. I am a systems and reference librarian here at University of Maryland Global Campus. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I believe quite strongly in the importance of accessibility. I myself self-identify as neurodivergent, but I've never sought an official identification. I know how important and empowering it can be for others to have that official identification of their divergence or disability. I'm used to my name being mispronounced, so I won't be offended if anyone has trouble here today. I'm a white woman that needs to get her hair re-dyed blue soon, and I'm wearing my Black Dragon Con Blood Drive t-shirt. Save a life if you can. On to the next.
Hi, I'm Renee Brown. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the archivist for the UMGC, well, for all of UMGC, and I'm a member of the accessibility team within the library. My wife happens to be blind, so I've been the library's go-to for screen reader questions and disability questions in general for a very, very long time. I also have anxiety disorder, which has caused me problems in the past, but right now is well medicated, so rock on. It's not considered a disability yet, but it might eventually. I was also one of the team leads for the disability team, graduation team for UMGC for 6 years prior to COVID. Since then, we've changed things. Everything changed during COVID, right? I've also volunteered to be the archivist for the Lead On Network, which was an organization founded by the former White House Director of Disability Policy. I am a white, brown-haired, brown-eyed woman with classic new mom bags under my eyes and messy hair.
Hi, I'm Colleen Quinn. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the reference services librarian at UMGC. Over the past year, discussing and advocating for accessibility has become a larger passion of mine as I've continued to learn and engage more and more with it. I live with an invisible illness, but I don't explicitly label myself as having a disability, though technically I do. I also prefer to watch TV with closed captions, though I don't have significant hearing loss. I am also a white woman with dirty blonde hair pulled back in a bun with large glasses on my face.
Okay. So in this image, there are 3 people. Each of them are standing on equally sized boxes behind a tall wooden fence, watching a baseball game. The tallest person can stay, excuse me, while standing on the box can see over the fence. The person in the middle with a medium height can stand on the box and see over the wooden fence. But the shortest person still cannot see over the wooden fence, even when standing on the same box. Under this image is the word equality, excuse me. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. This is one of our country's founding documents, but it isn't really true, is it? I mean, we as a country immediately started identifying everyone is not equal. Women were not equal. African Americans were definitely not equal. Anyone not of British descent were not equal. So we've got an institution claiming that everyone is the same and providing the same access or assistance to all people, when clearly these things don't work for everyone in the same way. That's equality, but it isn't equity. Excuse me. And then in the next slide, we have the original image here again, where you have the same three people standing on the same three boxes. And then you have a second image. The middle person is now standing on one box and can see over the fence. The tallest person is standing on the ground and can see over the fence. And the shortest person stands on two boxes and can see over the wooden fence too. Under this image, it says equity. Equity acknowledges that that all people have different needs that may need to be addressed differently for everyone to get the same outcome. Some people don't need anything. Some people need a step. Some need a ramp. This is especially important when it comes to education. Education means that citizens know their rights and can defend them. They can think critically about the issues that most affect them, and even when they will not obviously affect them, they are aware of the impact those issues might have on their community. As a university library, our job is to educate. We're here to help our students achieve their educational goals, but to do that, we need to provide access to the resources they need. For the majority, that's easy. We have databases, we teach our students how to search them, and we provide research and technical help as needed and requested, but not for all. For some, access can be a difficult task. Processing issues, physical disabilities, mental health disorders, or the unique mix of all of the above can stop our students in their educational tracks. This is how we, the University of Maryland Global Campus Library, have met ADA compliance and how we're attempting to surpass it. It's also important to know that what we will not be covering in this talk. We want to acknowledge that the digital divide is a problem in the United States and around the world. The lack of access to technology often reinforces socioeconomic gaps that gatekeep education. That being said, our university does have a program to help close that gap, and while not perfect, it is an important program to us and our university. In this talk, however, we are focusing on accessibility with a capital A, access for those people with disabilities.
On screen, there is an image, a black and white photo of a man sitting at a computer monitor with the computer tower next to the monitor. He is surrounded by other computer towers and monitors. The position of his computer means that he physically blocks access to the computer on his right. This image is from 1994. The University of Maryland Global Campus started out as the University of Maryland University College, dedicated to providing education to military personnel in the field, allowing our students to get an education and advance their careers as they worked. This usually meant teaching students in some unique accommodations with little access to traditional resources for research. As time went on, the university was able to create a more traditional library for both our students, staff, and faculty to use for research and scholarship. The then UMUC Library was a public space which we assumed was accessible and usable for everyone. When a patron with a disability came in to use our computers, we saw how woefully unprepared we were to serve them. While the physical space was accessible, our computers, databases, and articles were inaccessible. The library immediately took steps to create a more ADA compliant space, but why focus on just the bare minimum? We are here to serve students. How can we claim to do that if some of our students get substandard access to the information the library provides? It is also important to take a moment and recognize when we were at that point. Personal and home computers were still new, the internet was still new, and higher education was still grappling with how to meet the needs of our students using this technology as we're more local community libraries. We were underprepared, but so many of our colleagues saw a chance to do amazing things for accessibility. We still see that chance. As with all things surrounding accessibility, it has taken time, and in that time, our space has changed. We no longer have a physical access point for students, and our focus has shifted to ensuring that our digital collections are meeting accessibility standards and determining how we want to go beyond those standards, where and when we can. We have met the basic ADA compliance requirements with our in-house videos using basic transcripts. We are working on creating appropriate audio descriptions of video content. While our videos are not full of action, we want our users to have a positive experience. Some of our compliance is done great, but we're realistically in the planning stages of the future of our accessibility journey. We know where we have a little wiggle room to focus on hot topics, emergency issues, or immediate concerns, however you want to refer to them. But we need to determine what needs to be done now and what can be done later. With the new updates to WCAG and the 504 regulations coming, we are looking at our current measures and planning, focusing on what currently lacks any accessibility and developing plans to update existing accessible content where and when we can. We are actively revamping our library website and LibGuides, as well as the archives. We have also created a web accessibility working group and have a library representative in an interdepartmental group focusing on evaluating OERs for accessibility. Being a primarily online university, students come to the library website to access our collections, not a physical space. It's imperative that we ensure our website is accessible to all. Using WCAG 2.1 as a guide, we began planning a site redesign. The redesign of our site is being completed in phases. Phase 1 was moving to a new streamlined site, updating the general look and feel of the site while keeping key components of web accessibility in mind. Updates to our navigation were done, creating consistency across pages and meeting other library standards as well. We are currently in phase 2 and focusing on the content of our pages. Some important points we are reviewing include images with descriptive alt text, links given with both context and clarity, and HTML text properly formatted with headings, lists, and without superfluous CSS. Phase 2 will continue for the rest of the year as we review, rewrite, and republish forms of library content. UMGC also frequently uses open educational resources, or OERs, as a way to make classes more affordable and equitable for students. Doing so opened access to students that may have otherwise struggled financially to come to college. However, OERs offer their own problems with accessibility too. Often, OER content is not created in an accessible format. Ensuring the accessibility of OERs that the university uses is a priority, and the library helps where we can. We helped form an interdepartmental group and participated in a 6-week webinar series that explored the topic and potential solutions. Each team was encouraged to head their own individual project addressing accessibility in OERs. Our team has been developing a checklist to help review key points of web accessibility when reviewing or remixing OERs for learning resources and course content.
This slide happens to have a photo from our university archives. It's of a white man with glasses speaking from behind a podium. Next to it is incredibly embarrassing metadata. The metadata says title CM015, subject speaker, individuals Ahrensberger, source/rights UMGC, location Heidelberg, collection 21, UMGC photos, commencement 1, and division Europe, which tells you absolutely nothing. But archives and accessibility are often very hard to marry. You've got visual information, including photos, memorabilia, handwritten messages, on and on and on. And it often proves much harder to make accessible than other branches of the library. But it is still very worth pursuing. as the archives will often give researchers access to unique information on topics that might go otherwise undiscovered and unknown. When the archives began, there was really no thought given to accessibility. I was not here when it began. I'm not sure even if I was, there would have been thought given to accessibility. There was also no plan for digitizing collections at that time. There was no plan to provide access to people with disabilities, other than to provide it via the people actually working in the archives, sitting next to them and helping them. But we've moved beyond that. Not very far, but we have moved beyond it. As of now, we've begun digitizing collections, as you can see from the slide. Many of the collections that have been created for distribution were created for distribution or born digital, and we've been able to use the optical character recognition, OER, to provide transcription for that. Sadly, this isn't the case for all collections. Some written and even some of our typewritten collections have proved to be difficult, where while OER has been great to get some of the documents transcribed, it has really turned out to be hit or miss at best with things that are not that aren't made for the computer. This means we have to spend employee time fixing these transcriptions by hand over and over and over every time we add something new, and you have to check it. You can't just assume it's going to be right. The non-written collections are even worse. In the beginning, metadata was a new concept, and the archives only added subjects. There was little to no description included, as well you can see, because we didn't understand the impact that that description or lack thereof was going to have on researchers. And I'm not talking about researchers with disabilities. I'm talking about all researchers, but we walked in blind. So once we realized how much this was going to impact discovery, we instituted a description heavy way to approaching records, which we will talk about later.
So part of what we've been doing is working with our accessibility office, specifically creating guides that are meant for students without requiring that they identify as having an accessibility need. Sometimes that's a daunting task, to go through the process to find out that they have a need for assistance. We specifically have a guide at the moment for assistive technology. The Open Education Assistive Technology Resources Guide is meant to help students locate resources that can help them no matter what they're trying to do. It was, again, as I said, created with our accessibility office, and we've updated it multiple times since its original publication. And it points to no or low-cost resources that students may use on their own for a variety of needs. It spans everything from reading to math comprehension, and hits everything in between. The guide's primary purpose is to direct students to trustworthy technologies. So each technology that we recommend has been tested by the Accessibility Office, and to make sure that it's working the way the developer says it should, and also that the technology is not going to help a student unknowingly cheat or plagiarize. And it's likely that you're already working with someone. We're really great at that as librarians. We can work in a vacuum if we have to, but we generally prefer to work with others. Projects that you already have on the go or just finished can be a great starting point for you to locate other partners. So the UMGC Library works with, as I said, the Accessibility Office in creating LibGuides, and we're hoping to create more than what we have at the moment, which is really just the one. Has needs arise, and also we hope to anticipate needs at one point. At UMGC, our two departments currently reside under a similar larger department of student affairs, along with other sub-departments. This has helped us form our partnership with them since we have a similar students first mindset. We now have a workable partnership and open lines of communication with the Accessibility Office. We will build on this relationship and strengthen it as much as we can, not just for the LibGuides, but for the instructional videos, filling course resource requirements, and consultations about archive content, which is going to be great.
At UMGC, the Integrative Learning Design, or ILD, department is another sub-department under Student Affairs. ILD is primarily involved in creating and improving learning programs through course development. The UMGC Library partners with ILD when it comes to finding potential learning resources for classroom material, or assisting in searching for OERs. Multiple members from ILD are also a part of that OER and accessibility webinar series mentioned previously, which is an interdepartmental group we mentioned. We continue to work together on piloting our OER accessibility checklist, and we'll continue collaborating as more topics and opportunities surrounding accessibility arise.
So faculty. Faculty are often on the front lines of accessibility in our classrooms, whether they want to be or not. Currently, our faculty are working on determining the types of training that they would like and feel that they would benefit from the most. Many of our faculty feel that their knowledge of how to help students when there's a disability or a learning difference, no matter what it is lacking. While concerns are shared with both the administration and the Accessibility Office, work has been done to start development of a faculty training program in this area. Commonly known disabilities and the accommodations used for them, the faculty are comfortable with. But the accommodations granted for students with, for example, bipolar disorder and its accompanying morbidities or comorbidities, or PTSD and its comorbidities, the faculty, they have felt they need support from the Accessibility Office to better support students. Training, of course, takes time, and so does the development of training. But our faculty recognize how important this training has the potential to be. And while they want the training now, they also want the training to be right. Our internal faculty development group is working with the Accessibility Office and to identify what faculty need to know to teach. They don't want to bog the faculty down with cognitive overload any more than they already are, and create appropriate training that can be used by the faculty over many courses that may have different types of accessibility needs. The equity training, in fact, rolled out for everyone in the university last week, about 5 days ago. Hopefully this training will be the first of many that will help our university community better support each other. As a large organization, UMGC often has broad plans and goals that are reported to us and can go through multiple interpretations before they come to us with directions of how to fulfill those plans at our level. The amount of latitude that we have can vary depending on who we are working with, how we plan to fulfill our obligations, and the accessibility needs that must be met.
So the first of the university-wide initiatives is general compliance via accommodations. As we mentioned earlier, once the library became aware that there were unmet needs in the student population, we began immediately working toward a more inclusive design in our physical space, but also, and more importantly, online. The library began looking at classroom readings, ebooks, and databases, all of this knowing that we aren't likely to have a huge impact, but with the hope that we could steer faculty members and course designers to a more accessible design with regards to library resources. Thankfully, we got support from the university. UMGC historically specializes in serving the U.S. military, as we mentioned before. This means that being able to bring content to students downrange is vitally important. And luckily enough, reliable access to resources translates into accessible resources. We also have a strategic plan that just recently came out. And the minute that we heard it was coming out, we were very excited to see what was being developed, especially with our diversity and accessibility office in-house. We expected disability to be a major part of this heavily diversity, equity, and inclusion influenced document, and sadly, that did not happen. While DEI was discussed at length, no specific points were made addressing accessibility for people with disabilities. Accessibility is very often the part of diversity that gets passed over, and instead is pushed toward an accessibility office when it should really be represented in both places. As soon as we discovered this, as soon as we read this, members of this panel reached out with our concerns. We found that in conversations around accessibility, they were more focused on accessibility in terms of the digital divide and access to technology, not accessibility in terms of disability. Both are important aspects, but simply supplying access to technology does not guarantee, rather, that the content is going to be accessible. This is the hard part of accessibility. Walking up to people that you think, well, walking up to people who think they are doing the right thing and telling them, really, no, you're only going halfway. I'm so sorry. Or worse, hey, you all are coming at this all wrong. And it's our responsibility to do just that. We don't, it is not just for those that need access, it's for everyone. And more universal design means that more people can access this in more ways that might be better for them. But you have to be willing to rabble-rouse a little to get people to listen, and it's always hard. But you also need to be willing to lose. And this is where we're going to be upfront and clear and say, even after being approached by multiple people with this concern, UMGC's strategic initiatives still does not include specific mention of accessibility. It just didn't happen. And we feel like it is very important to share failures as well as successes in this arena. We don't always win, but we will never give up. We are also very lucky to have a wealth of knowledge spread throughout the university. When we can tap into that knowledge, working with the accessibility office and the integrative learning designs, when we tap into that knowledge, working with the accessibility office and integrative learning designs, and those are two of just the most obvious partners we have.
So, has a state university, UMGC is part of this University System of Maryland and affiliate institutions. This consortium allows our library, and probably a few of yours, to access resources and collections that alone we couldn't afford. Our fellow consortium members want and do push for accessible resources, and it's helpful to have the proof that we're not alone in this push. That's not to say that we don't run into our fair share of problems around collection development in a collective sense. We don't have the right or the ability to tell another institution how to spend their budget, but we can, in the right spaces, express our desires for collective purchasing, emphasizing the need for resources that meet our students' accessibility needs, prioritizing the vendors that are doing more than the bare minimum. USMAI has one such group called, it's new, it's called the Collections Community Forum, and it's a place where, where we're meant to be sharing collections-related consortial news, resources and documentation, connect with each other and with the larger collections community, really the library community, around our collection needs. This collective effort has run into what we all run into, which is the priorities issue. We're also in the process of updating our integrated library system, and this work has it's been recognized as a very high priority in the face of all other work. We haven't forgotten the importance of the collective collections and accessibility, but it's been forced into a backseat for the moment.
We also have the Association on Higher Education and Disabilities, also known as AHEAD. They recently hosted a webinar explaining the proposed 504 regs for web and mobile access, and how others can contribute to the conversation through civic engagement. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act requires public institutions to make reasonable accommodations for students with disabilities so they can participate in their school programs and related activities. The DOJ invited public comments on the proposed changes for a period of time, which concluded earlier this month. The webinar highlighted the language being used for the exemptions and limitations and challenged attendees to consider whether things were missing or if things needed better definitions or other constraints that need to be in consideration. While these regulations are only applicable to public institutions, AHEAD and many others have also encouraged others in private education to still consider these same regulations, because it's likely only a matter of time before similar regulations are imposed on them as well. So using this knowledge of 504 regulations and understanding the type of accommodations that would need to be created to stay in compliance, we can begin challenging ourselves to start meeting those requirements proactively before they are really needed, instead of only reactively when they're required.
So just really quick, someone has their hand raised. We can't turn on your mics, so if you have a question, would you please type it into either the web chat or the Q&A, and we will happily answer your question. But for this, so speaking of faculty again, the Council of University System Faculty has its name suggested, faculty focused. However, like all good faculty, this group often focuses on the intersection of faculty and student work life, basically, in the classroom, and how one affects the other. During the height of the pandemic, QSIF, which is their acronym, began looking into began focusing on faculty and student well-being. Specifically, has the isolation people were feeling heightened and became more and more of a priority. But there was also a more general focus on mental health issues and how to address them with care and sensitivity, how to give the faculty resources to support themselves and their students in what was probably one of the most difficult times in recent history. They have had listening sessions, webinars, and from that work, they've made recommendations to the university system and to the University Board of Regents. UMGC has taken on board the importance of providing such important support to our students. And while our library does not provide direct services for mental health, we do our best to stay abreast of the university's program and programs and how to direct students to them as they need. Many faculty and students suffer from cognitive overload, depression, for some worsened by the events of the last 3 years. And QSIF, while not a governing body within USM, has worked to identify both student and faculty needs related to their mental health and how it affects their ability to succeed. And with those recommendations for policy changes going forward to the Board of Regents. In general, when dealing with students, these recommendations have been to support the faculty in providing support to students, ensuring that the faculty know what to do when a student comes to them with a mental health need, an accessibility accommodation need, or if a student just says, I'm having trouble, there's nothing obvious that's going on, but everything seems to be going wrong. This often can help a faculty member by enforcing the established professional boundaries that they need to maintain, while also enforcing for them, not forcing them, into a situation where the faculty member feels that they have nothing that they can do but be the sole support for the student, because all the resources that exist, no one knows what they are or how to find them. So what does all that mean? Well, oh dear. Okay, something got missing. So MHEC. MHEC is the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and they are, again, an advisory body that exists within the Maryland system. Their job has volunteers. They're generally faculty, but sometimes there's administrators too, is to look over proposed policy or laws that are coming before the state legislature, and to provide the point of view of what those things will actually do to education in Maryland. So if someone wants to put in a policy for how you do eyelashes in cosmetology school, everyone at MHEC has to review that law, even if it has nothing to do with you. But the point is that you don't have a legislature who has no understanding of how education, especially at the higher level, actually works, making a law that says, well, everyone has to be able to read at this level. That varies for so many people all the time. So in practice, what it should do, as I said, is result in proposed laws and policies being read and commentary being offered, allowing faculty voices to speak and have an effect on those laws and policy. The group is meant to provide impacts about how their work will be affected, how the institutions will be affected, how the students will be affected by the proposed changes. A lot of legislation is unrelated to accessibility in any obvious way. But if your faculty members are knowledgeable and passionate about accessibility, their review of policy and legislation can and will have a focus on how these things affect accessibility for everyone. The library currently has a seat on our academic advisory board, which is our version of the faculty senate, and the representative there hears both the work of CUSIF and MHEC representatives and can bring up questions, discuss what the issues are from our point of view so that the representative knows from the library's perspective what's going on and what will be affected going forward.
So going forward, all of the opportunities we've outlined above are great, but that's what we're already doing. How are we planning to do more? Like, what steps have we already started to explore? How do we pave the way for a more inclusive library? Well, very good question. First off, we are instituting modeling of accessible behavior. And that's an easy place to start. Accessibility is a mindset. And the more you interact with it, the more you'll find yourself defaulting to a more inclusive way of speaking and acting. For instance, the UMGC Library has begun introducing themselves during events with descriptive introduction, as you experienced earlier. This is a great way to let people know who you are, and for people who are blind, it lets them know if other people in the room are people of color, similarly disabled, etc., especially over the internet where you're not getting those cues. Also, we've begun creating online accessible spaces. What does that mean? It can be as simple as enabling captions or being aware of colors that are hard for low vision students to read, or getting rid of images that are distracting for people who are neurodivergent. There are places where we can improve in this arena. I mean, obviously, always. Events especially can be sometimes overwhelming for someone with a disability. Online or physical, either one. Reading captions and a chat at the same time can be incredibly tough. Navigating a room where chairs have been pulled out from a table but haven't been put back can be dangerous. Worse, and this is the worst, making the accessibility options not front and center when entering an event can be frustrating and make it sometimes scary to the point of being daunting for people with disabilities. specific example here. I vividly remember having to run people down who had obvious disabilities at commencement. Why? They were used to not getting any help from anyone. So they were just making their way on their own like they always do. They were not used to accommodations by default. So they just didn't expect them to be there. So having to make sure that people understand that accessibility is an option and it's here sometimes means, running them down and being like, hey, can we help you? Not that we're perfect. I mean, I'm going to keep saying that over and over. No one is perfect. There are still plenty of places to improve. Providing interpreters has proved difficult over and over and over again for us. You will note, we do not have an interpreter today. It was due to miscommunication on our part. We take that one all on us. But would it have been good to have one? I mean, nobody here needed one, but later on, if somebody wanted to watch the recording, it might have been nice to have the interpreter in the corner. What if someone wanted to attend last minute? These are the things where we have the opportunity to think beyond what is needed and normalize access for everyone. Oh, yay! I get to redeem myself now. Again, we have a slide up here that is the same one as earlier, but I will describe it more in detail in a second. Let's talk about the physical archives first. Upcoming projects for the physical archives. We had not planned very much when it first got opened. I wasn't here. I wasn't part of it, like I said. I mean, at one point in time, we were stuck in an attic. You find a way to make that accessible. I couldn't. I really tried. But that's changed. We recently moved, and the move was planned instead of last minute, like so many are. So the discussion to make it a physically accessible place came into discussion, and I really pushed for it. And after going back and forth, we finally got a processing/research room that is completely accessible and will allow students to have access to the archival records right there in a room that they can easily get to. We've also invested in our descriptions and metadata. This is where I get to redeem myself. Our original metadata was terrible. It was easy to label things, 2 men shaking hands, but is easy what we're really striving for? No. Is easy helping a disabled researcher or really anyone looking for items? Again, no. As we move forward, we're expanding our metadata by elaborating on our descriptions in an effort to provide quality information to anyone, not just people with disabilities who come visit the archives. Thus, we're moving from 2 men shaking hands to Ray Ahrensberger, UMGC's first president, speaking from a podium at UMGC Europe commencement, which is what the metadata now reads on the slide. It's the same picture as earlier, but we're now telling you where to find it. It's in collection 1, image 5. The subject is UMGC Europe graduation, speaker, UMGC Europe commencement speaker. So it is a lot more detailed as to who the speaker is, whereas before it just said speaker. We also have the individual, instead of just saying Ahrensberger as everybody, like as if everybody knew who Ahrensberger was, we give you a first name so that if you don't have the description on hand, you can go look him up and figure out who he is. Then the description, again, Ray Ahrensberger, UMGC's first president, and then the source and the format. Hang on, I'm sorry about that. This is an opportunity for us to model the kind of metadata and the kind of description we want to see in archival records across the board, going beyond what we see in the actual physical items and taking a moment to describe what we feel when we look at a photograph or the worn, obviously well-loved edges of a handwritten note. There are opportunities to move forward and give people who are blind more of what we see when we look at something.
So as we continue to create new web content, we will continue to apply web accessibility guidelines from the initial design point and not as an afterthought. The goal is to take our lessons by revamping and redesigning old web content and making our adherence to WCAG second nature. As WCAG receives updates, so will we continue to update and improve our web content delivery. We continue to focus on using accessible forms of HTML tags for creating the look and feel of our content and avoiding unnecessary CSS, which causes issues when you are using a screen reader, for example. Our biggest areas of improvement continue to be adding sufficient and descriptive alt text and descriptive link text for those who may be visually impaired, and again, using a screen reader. Continuing to maintain our library website within LibGuide CMS also ensures that the UMGC library retains immediate control over our content for quick updates, rather than having to apply to marketing for updates, which often takes much longer periods of time. So taking responsibility for directly creating and updating our web content also keeps us accountable for not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk too.
Real quick before we move on.
Yes.
We have a lovely question in the Q&A. Do we want to try and answer that now, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take a stab at that. Anita B wrote, you talk about being accessible to the public, but in order to get a job at the library, most job descriptions require that you stand, bend, stretch, squat, be able to lift 50 pounds. That's still in a lot of our job descriptions, and it's silly. Or get on your knees to do the job. Also, if you're neurodiverse, it's very hard for you to keep a job at a library. If you were diagnosed on the job, it would be hard for you to keep the job because libraries are not willing to work with you. What can we do to change that? Well, first of all, Anita, if you find that people are discriminating against you for accommodations in the workplace, reach out to HR. If HR does not help you, go farther up. Go find someone in the state that can help you redress this, because if you were diagnosed on the job, you should not be fired for that. And if you ask for accommodations, you should also not be fired for that. That is downright BS. As for the job descriptions, that is something we really need to work on, and we need to work with HR. Recently, I was working on a student position description, and I lobbied very hard to get rid of be able to lift 50 pounds, because why do we need that in there? We don't. It's silly. If you can't pick up 50 pounds, can you pick up 10? Can you pick up 5? I can pull stuff out of a box and hand it to you, and you can move it that way. There are ways that we can make our job descriptions more accessible, and we need to, because so few people with disabilities are able to get jobs nowadays. And if you do, you're lucky and you're thankful and you don't want to rock the boat, right? That should not be the way it is. That absolutely should not be the way it is. And I will say that over and over and over and over and over again. And if you need help, our emails are at the end. Just send me an email and I would be happy to put you in contact with any of the resources that I have. I hope that helps. Sorry.
No, you're good. I will also say I am in fact the AAB library rep. And I've been hearing the faculty are trying to get job descriptions updated because they have a lot of the same different problems, but similar vein of that some of the requirements just make no sense for what their actual job requirement is. And yes, they're fighting with HR because someone in HR decided 20 years ago that the copy paste language was how they were going to do it. And it's a script basically somewhere. So yes, if you're in a position where you can lobby for change, talk to your HR people when you want to hire someone. And if they give you a position description and print it out, take a red pen and go through it and make corrections and send it back and say, this is what needs to change.
This is where you have to be willing to rabble rouse.
Yeah. And that's the answer. And yes, we need to get those updated, and it's a fight. So
it is.
Thank you for.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
I also just want to take a moment. We just had a comment in chat that if the person is comfortable with reposting it again to everyone, or I'm happy to just read without mentioning who it was. The statement of it feels like so much of foregrounding accessibility is asking why and challenging just the way things are. And I don't know if I could have said it any better than that.
No, that is the perfect way to put it.
Humans don't like change, and accessibility is all about change.
And we're just going to have to suck it up because this is what we need to do to provide equity.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and proceed again.
Sure.
If anybody else has any questions as we continue on, please enter them in.
Please post them. We're happy,
We're happy to continue pausing, or we can always revisit them towards the end of our presentation.
Right.
So carry on. Let's see.
Next.
Here we go.
So another major project we're doing is on all of our videos. And when I say all of them, I mean almost all of them.
All of them.
It's a huge project. We're revamping all of them, trying to embed access in the videos, and we're trying to do it from the beginning of any new project because this slide says YouTube's automatic captions typically provide about 60 to 70% accuracy, which means that 1 in 3 words can be wrong. And if you want some real fun with captions, you can check out YouTube caption fails. Hysterical. They write a script, they read it to one another, they turn on automatic captions, and then they use those automatic captions to re-record what they have done, which is usually completely off base. Then they will turn on captions for that second recording and re-record it again, and it's the funniest thing. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing, game of telephone ever. But first and foremost, that's what we're working on is captions. The simple and easy way is just to turn on auto captions, but I mean, there's a reason they're called craptions in the deaf community. They're often mistranscribed or just flat out wrong. So while easy, it may not be the best choice if you're trying to make a more accessible space for your students. If you want to see how bad they can be, just really go to YouTube caption fails. It's hysterical. Another easy thing you can do is just to provide your script with the videos. That is almost better than just turning on auto captions. It's perfectly acceptable. But it's not really moving it's not moving the needle forward any. So let's talk about how do we make transcripts more than just that. So what we're trying to work toward is giving context to our videos so that the deaf community experiences the same level of access as everyone else attending the university. How? Through descriptive transcripts. Descriptive transcripts include easy things like words that appear on a screen. It seems strange, but like it lets the person know that there's something on the screen, even when there's not, even when a person is not saying something. So like if we put up a slide that said paving the way forward, are we saying that out loud? No. But if you put it up there and say paving the way forward is on the screen, then they know. More importantly, though, things like sounds, cues, sound effects. How many times have you clicked on something in a database and it has played a sound and it's taken like, a millisecond, half a second to transfer over because it was playing that sound before it moved you to the new screen? Deaf users don't have any concept of that. They just don't. Also timestamps. If you let them know, hey, this happened at this timestamp in this video, they can move forward and move back easily rather than being like, it's in this transcript somewhere. I guess I'll find it, and also that kind of gives them an idea of how long they last. Brandeis has a great guide to descriptive transcripts. I've included it here. I go back to it often when I'm trying to make the case for descriptive transcripts because it's great. Audio descriptions are another thing that we're working on. They are often the overlooked, unsung heroes of blind users, especially in library how-to videos, where there are often pages where a person is speaking while moving their cursor around the page. You go up here to the left and click on this button. Like that does nothing for the student who can't see. So in this instance, audio descriptions can really be invaluable. You're going to move, the cursor is moving to the left. That way they know which side of the screen they need to be kind of navigating in with their screen reader. But much like captioning, it has varying levels of quality. Hiring a professional is probably the best way to go. But I mean, funding, right? So instead, UMGC is just trying, with the help of the Accessibility Office, to develop something on our own that is that's quasi-descriptive. It's probably not going to be the best, but it's not going to be horrible. But also, the first thing to remember if you want to do audio descriptions is that you don't have to include everything. You don't need to know that I have glasses on and wearing a pink shirt. Just remember that if it is important for the plot, if me wearing glasses is important because later on I'm going to take them off and become Superwoman, include it. If not, just leave it out. Oh, and also, I just want to point out one of the very first things we've run into with audio description. Gotta love YouTube. You have to create an entirely separate video to add audio descriptions. They do not allow you to have different levels of audio on their videos. So thanks, YouTube. I mean, and YouTube's the default. So, ugh. So I've covered the big two. I've covered deafness and blindness, but there's more than just deafness and blindness out there. So let's talk about neurodivergency right now. Sometimes videos can be too fast, sometimes they can be too slow for a person who's neurodivergent. It all has an impact on how they're going to learn. What's an easy way to fix this? Give them control. Giving users control is really just a great baseline to work from, and it is especially good for neurodivergent students. It allows them to adjust the audio, the playback speed, but you can also create a welcoming environment by using a consistent style, using a consistent navigation, so they always know, I gotta go to the left, I gotta go to the left, I gotta go to the left. And to make sure the navigation buttons are always in the same place and colors are consistent and neurodivergent friendly. Honestly, videos, the most complicated thing that we are taking, the most complicated step we are taking in regards to accessibility. They are going to be our biggest lift, but they are one of the areas with the most opportunity for us to explore and excel in making videos accessible to all students.
It remains crucial that we maintain our partnerships with other departments and keep our dialogue around accessibility open. Just because we may finish a current project together, like our specific LibGuides or the webinar series, that should not mean our partnership has concluded. Momentum is key for making real change. We don't want to find ourselves grinding to a halt because we've reached a possible ending. For example, the Access and OER interdepartmental group mentioned multiple times in this presentation has agreed to continue brainstorming additional initiatives that the university could pursue beyond just the development of our OER and accessibility checklist. We've also committed to some future meetings to keep in contact around the topic of accessibility and ensure we keep our passions alive and well. And what I mean by future meetings, it doesn't necessarily mean once a month. As long as you have at least an additional meeting on the books, if you've agreed there's a specific amount of time or there's things that come up in your schedule that you need extra time before you meet again, that's okay, but just put that meeting on the calendar. Another way we are continuing to nurture our existing partnerships is extending invitations to members of UMGC's accessibility team to our library department meetings, especially when some form of accessibility in the library is on the agenda. It's like remembering to water the spot where we've planted a seed. We can't only water it once and expect it to keep flourishing. Has it been a while since we checked in with each other? Let's send a quick chat or forward an email or opportunity that they may be interested in. Our hope would be that we can use this partnership to develop lines of communication between ourselves, the Accessibility Office, Integrative Learning Design, and the schools that will outlive each of us. We want the work we are doing to have a solid and established enough foundation that in 100 years, there is no question that the library is working with these partners to improve our accessibility in classrooms and collections.
So the fact is that accessibility needs are never going to be met 100%. It's not possible. But not being able to meet that 100% doesn't mean that we don't try. We need to put in more than a token effort. In 5 years, some long existing but not acknowledged disability or learning difference is finally going to be acknowledged. And every institution of learning, the government, museums, all of them, they're going to have to take steps to make their content accessible again. So we need to be open and we need to be flexible in our approaches to accessibility now so that we can be flexible in 5, 10, 30 plus years. So this may mean making technology decisions now that are going to frustrate you and your colleagues. PDFs can be made accessible, but in the long term, making an original PowerPoint presentation available can be more accessible. It's Microsoft. Microsoft is going to want it to be accessible somewhat. Using plain language means that you have a wider audience in the now, and your meaning doesn't become lost as fast as language evolves. The best example of this that I can give you is from a previous job. We got a specialty mini CD burner. CDs were about that big when they were done. And it printed on them too, so you could made it pretty. And it was super useful. Early 2000s. Within 2 to 3 years, I think, we had one restricted computer that could update, that could run this software to run the printer. We had to fight with IT every week to not take away that computer because you couldn't update the security software. You couldn't attach it to the internet, which they didn't understand. And we had to pray every day that that printer liked us today and would work. The PDFs that we put onto that printer were all accessible. We developed them specially so that it didn't matter if you were using a PC or a Mac. You could put in this little CD and you could read the contents. It was desperately relevant information for some of our users who they didn't have consistent internet access. They were farmers. They worked in the fields all day, but they had their computers with them if they had laptops. And they loved these things. We gave them out by the hundreds. I ran that piece of tech until 2017 on hopes and prayers. But every year we help 2,000 plus people. And so you have to figure out what you have in the moment and what can be useful and make it work.
So we've talked about making it work. We've talked about where we were. We've talked about where we're heading. But is it as easy as all that? Honestly, no. And I'm sure you already know this. We struggle like everyone else to make sure that all people can use our library. We don't know all the answers. We don't have all the solutions. We are just trying. And even in trying, there are still barriers. The first one, apathy. Image today is more important than ever. With easy access to reviews on many different platforms, even institutions like in universities can't afford to seem apathetic towards students that they claim to serve. And while institutions, companies, etc., are willing to give lip service to the idea of accessibility, many are finding that they're being called out for a lack of it. Accessibility scans are now widespread, advocacy groups are everywhere, and even trolls are all easy ways for an institution to fall victim to their own hubris. But it is more important than ever to follow up on promises of accessibility with actual actions. Accessibility is such a part of the educational experience. Yes, in the physical library spaces, it's important, but it's also in the machines we use. It's also, I mean, think about microfilm readers. Like, how is a blind person going to access that? It's also in the technology we provide. How many databases don't actually have full accessibility? They're also in the events that we host, both online and in person. And yes, those events are part of the full student experience. So why leave your population out of that? But this is where we're speaking up, and that makes a huge difference. Let someone know when you see an issue or problem, and it can go a long way to help correcting the issue.
I think we've all heard it before in some form or other. The first step is the hardest. So first, take an inventory on any existing partnerships. Do you interact the most with faculty and instructors, the writing center, or tutoring, someone else? Leveraging existing partnerships and finding commonalities can be a great way to get momentum started around the topic of accessibility. Another option, do you know of any existing departments that have accessibility on the brain? Does your institution have an accessibility or accommodations office you could reach out to and ask, how can we help or get started on prioritizing accessibility in our department? If you have a specific project in mind that you would like to work in partnership with others, great. If you're not sure where to even begin, you could start by sharing a webinar recording or an upcoming webinar registration to help guide a conversation. Maybe invite different stakeholders to a roundtable discussion or an informal brown bag lunch type of meeting. It's about getting your foot in the door or creating a space where everyone can come to the table and begin talking about your passions and how accessibility is being handled or overlooked at your particular institution. Remember, any step together is a step in the right direction. Partnerships can take time, so don't be discouraged if you don't hit it off right away. Just keep an open mind and door for others.
Being accessible is expensive. It takes your time as staff. It takes monetary investment in other staff, in tools and programs. And all of this can mean that your regular work and budget becomes your roadblock. So none of us are ever going to have the budget we dream of. Unlimited funds. Whether that budget is for money or for person power. So try to be you can be the type of workspace that we all try to avoid, getting staff to work off the clock on their passion projects for patrons. You'll get tons of work done. You'll suffer burnout and have to replace all your staff pretty consistently. Don't do this. The better option is to start planning for accessibility at the start of your projects. If it's a known budget or resource issue, it allows you to be realistic when creating your timeline. It'll add more time, yes, but overall, it'll probably save you time and money. You won't be forced to go back and redo work or renegotiate a contract with a vendor. And in school settings, you won't cause a lawsuit. All good things. However, since new resources, staff, and budget will, again, not appear out of thin air when needed, leverage what you've got. Many staff are passionate about accessibility. So find ways to work that passion into their everyday duties without overburdening them, using realistic timeframes for projects. If it takes you 2 weeks to do this, but then you have to go backwards to do this other thing and it adds 4 weeks, then start off your project expecting to take 3 to 4 weeks to have completion. And if your budget is $20, not a realistic one, but if it's that, but adding accessibility later on is going to cost you 60 or 80. Well, then start with a heavier budget at the beginning, and then you'll have an excess and everyone looks at you like you did magic. It's a balancing act. And yes, the added time and budget can cause confusion and some stress as everyone gets into the rhythm of having accessibility-centered projects and how they work. But it only works if you operate, of course, in an environment that allows you a level of control over your projects and budgets. If you're in a more realistic workspace, you're going to have to make do. It sucks. Sorry, that one slipped out. Research the technology you already have. Find out what you can repurpose or modify. A lot of people don't know that Adobe Reader has a read out loud function. It's clunky and it's robotic, but it's there. Can you use it? Will it meet the most basic needs of accessibility while you advocate for better? Our technology guide, mentioned earlier, includes free and low-cost tools for your students that they can use on their own. We would be thrilled if one of you said, hey, this works for me too. We're happy to share. Vendors are only going to do as much as they're paid to do, or meet the requirements of law. So if you want better, advocate to your vendors. When you speak to them, bring up scenarios you know that they don't meet expectations. Inquire about how and when they plan to fix the database, the ebook, the videos, the PDFs. Mentioning these things that you want for the future. You don't have to make promises to buy or pay for them, but if they know that this is what you're looking for, they're a business and they want yours. Take advantage. So speaking of our vendors, we've learned from our accessibility office that sometimes they cheat. I know, it's shocking. Take a moment. But when following WCAG, it's not abnormal for vendors to only meet accessibility guidelines for one technology type. PCs versus Macs, PDF versus EPUB, JAWS versus Dragon. And while I'm sure there are so many more examples, it can trap us. We've done our best. We read through the software specs. We think we know what we've bought. And the contract. We get the contract and then it doesn't work. And we're probably not going to be able to get out of that contract because technically they met what they said they were going to do. So the best bet you can do is to test everything. And that's exhausting, but you have to test it. If you have an old outdated computer that still sort of creeps along, test it on that. Test it on a Mac, test it on a PC. That weird hybrid computer that appeared one day in the corner. Phones, tablets, screen readers. If you have it, if you have a piece of technology, test anything new that you can. Test your old stuff too, because sometimes you'll be surprised. And then you should develop a plan for what to do when, and it's always when, something doesn't work for the user. It's not a bad thing. It gives you a chance to be creative and to problem solve and to collect what you need to prove to the administration that you need more. Technology has been an amazing and transformative force in the world. It's allowed access in unprecedented ways. And students can do for themselves now so much more because technology allows them the freedom and accessibility to do it. It's also a major problem. Technology becomes obsolete so quickly that it becomes questionable where you should invest your funds, and that's why you need to test. Transferring between phones alone is supremely difficult, but the older your original technology is, the older the technology that you're using is, the original files may not work. And that's just with recent stuff. If you go back to the early 2000s and 90s, file formats and the original OCRs, you have to really hope that those were done well enough that they still work for you. The older and simpler programs probably aren't going to run on a newer computer simply because the way that they're designed is so different. So don't just rely on the old tried and trues either. For example, New Roman Times, when read by certain screen readers, especially for documents that were not designed digitally, turns learners into lemmers. This is very funny, but it's also super frustrating. the fact is you're also going to have students that are going to struggle with their own personal technology. It's either going to be their tried and true phone that's 10 years old and probably should have been turned in years ago, or they have the latest and greatest. And it doesn't work with our older technologies. So again, be flexible. You might have to struggle to figure out the best way to get that technology to work together or to force an update if necessary. But it can be done. Just don't panic.
So these are all great, but like how do we know the way forward? How do we know what to do? How do we know what to expect? How do we know where to go? Well, you took a great first step. You came here, you attended this presentation, you listened to us talk about how we're trying. Other great first steps, talk to someone with a disability. Engage those stakeholders that are really going to be using whatever you're creating. Talk to your students, ask them what they need to succeed or even just to get access. You might be shocked at the responses. Sometimes something as simple as changing a background color or image on a website might make all the difference for someone. Also, go online. There's so many organizations that would be willing to help you and talk to you for free. You just need to reach out to them. Places like the American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD, the ALA, the Library Accessibility Alliance. There's even a universal design checklist out there that you can make use of. You just have to go look at it. And if you get stuck, reach out to your peers. People like us on the panel, other people in the presentation who sat around, people who are next to you. You never know who's striving to be more than just ADA compliant.
So once again, we have our images, although this time we now have a third. We have our equality image where everyone has the same size box trying to see over a fence. We have our equity image where two people have boxes, one of which is elevated enough that they can see over the fence as the shortest person. But then we have a third image, and this is the image that has no fence in front of the people, and all are cheering as they watch a baseball game. This image says justice. And that's what universal access, no barriers, active access and participation from the whole community is. This is the goal of all of our work. Building equity and accessibility can be hard. It goes against the grain a lot of the time. We've got to build this web page and that collection or get the archives records into this format now. But accessibility is about intentionality. You need to know who your user is at this moment, who the user is next week, and then imagine who they can be in the future. Can you do your work quickly and efficiently and still meet accessibility requirements? Go beyond them? Yes, you can. You may need to take some minor changes to your processes. Maybe you'll need to overhaul the whole process. No matter which it is, do it. You and your fellows will benefit from it. Your students will benefit from it. Your institutions will benefit from it.
Like in so many other areas, we as librarians need to be smart about what we then do. Collaborations are going to be vital. Work with your university's accessibility offices, your vendors, and if you have them, your consortiums to make changes. But don't do this in a vacuum. Be sure to talk with your students, direct surveys that can give you vital information, but so can anonymous survey results. Your students need to have a voice in this process as much as you are able to give them. A single student should not determine all the changes you make, but like in our democracy, every voice needs to be heard. Students needing accessibility accommodations are often used to having to work with an imperfect system, ramps that others decided are meant for them to sit on, lecturers facing away from them as they struggle to hear, staring at a Venn diagram for hours and never being able to parse out what it means, and having to reread a text multiple times to understand the meaning. These experiences are often isolating, especially if you have never had an acknowledged disability. and students take those experiences into their social and political lives. Thank you for listening. We appreciate all of you being here. This is the most vital step to providing an accessible library to your students.
I'm going to take a quick minute that's our contact information, but I also want to take a quick minute to address the anonymous attendee question, closed captioning question. Were you referring to live closed captioning? Can you provide more on how that would work? Having a script seems like it would be difficult for a debate style setting or take away from the authenticity of an edutainment type program. Specifically, the script is talking about the library how-to videos. For something that's live, enabling auto captions is often the best way to go, but the second layer here is to reach out and find an actual interpreter that would assist, because the interpreter is going to be more experienced and is going to be a better way to provide access to your deaf attendees. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you have a live debate and you're live streaming it and you're recording it, when you're done, go back and update, fix the transcript, because it's going to get things wrong. It's doing its best, and some of them are actually really good live transcribers, but I have some of them will just, yeah, they're going to get things wrong. Anita, I don't know why there's nothing on the screen.
I also sent you my email privately, Anita, so that you can have it, copy and paste.
Yeah. So, if anyone has any other questions or comments, we're happy to hear them. Try to answer.
And I cannot stress again how important it is for you to just look at the person sitting next to you or the person in your meeting and asking them about accessibility, because you'd be shocked how many people have an experience. And people in my office know my wife is blind, but before I came forward and told them that, they were just kind of stumbling through screen reader access issues. Now they give me what they're working on. I take it downstairs to my wife in her office and we go through it together. And it's worked really well. I mean, it's, it has been an awesome way to make us a little more accessible.
Yeah. As I said, I'm neurodivergent. I'm now in charge of our video production, to my horror.
To my delight.
Very.
But the first video I produced as part of this, I took out almost all of the animations. The previous person who done it, I'm going to be lucky if I can come even close to filling her shoes. She's amazing, but she liked to do animations. She liked to have movement in the videos. And for me, that was just very distracting. As it is, I left one animation in, and I've already received a comment that we should maybe remove the animation. So that's for next week, Mariette. But yeah, and the failure, there was a minor failure on the audio descriptions because I knew we needed to do it, and we'd actually thought about it, and we just, it's such a new process to us that it didn't fully fledge before we finished the video. So that's next month, Mariette's job.
And that's going to happen. That's going to happen to all of you here in this presentation. It's going to happen to the three of us over and over and over again. You're going to be like, I really need to do that. And you're going to get to the end of the project and go, we really needed to do that, and we didn't do it.
We didn't do it.
We're going to have to do that.
Yeah. And I don't know about Colleen, but she seems to often get left to be, go meet this person and schmooze them, get them to do what we need them.
Yes, we send Colleen out to be our face.
Yes, she's very good at it.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. But it's just any sort of effort that you can make is better than nothing. Just mentioning it, bringing it up in conversation. Again, like Renee mentioned, you would be so surprised. And a lot of it too is just even if it's kind of coming to an own personal like aha moment of, I never thought of it this way, but like I mentioned previously, like in my introduction, I don't necessarily have a hearing problem, but boy, do I love closed captions, and it makes a difference. And it's again, looking at all these possibilities and ways that you can just expand and improve the accessibility of engaging with content and in a meaningful way, not just
Which
a
reminds
contact,
me,
a meaningful.
I'm now tapping you for checking our captions, because for me, my neurodivergence, I sit there and I look at captions and I'm like, nope, these distract me. I can watch the video or I can read the caption. Can't do both. So you're gonna get grabbed for that.
We have a question, kind of an anonymous, and this absolutely hits this on the head. Oh, this is tough when we're talking about animation stuff. This seems to go against some of the training that we've had for providing a presentation or a program. Where is the fine line between making something accessible but not lackluster? And that is a very fine line.
I thought I hit that line, and apparently I missed it.
A lot of it is realizing that whoever decided that this is the way that makes a good presentation did not have experience with a variety of disabilities, that it is a very singular engagement interpretation. You know what I mean? Like engaging with the content, that yes, you want things to catch people's eye. And I'm thinking about how many times do we say don't include all this text if you're going to say it out loud on a slide, but it's incredibly important for somebody who has a disability and can't hear it or they can't see it. Like you have to just walk it all back and start from the ground up, and maybe it comes across as lackluster, but perhaps what's more important is that it's truly accessible.
Yeah. From my point of view, the best thing I think you can do is figure out what your video is, what needs to be on that screen to share what your message. Try and get rid of as much of the quote unquote distracting stuff that you can. It's not always going to work, but try that. When you're done, send it around to your colleagues. Is this too fast? Did I miss something? Again, my audio, I've missed some of the audio descriptions in my video, but getting other people's opinions is probably going to be the best way to go forward. It should give you a chance to find out and make sure that you haven't made things too fast. If someone says, oh, this is super boring, but everyone else is telling you that this is a great video, guess what? You've probably made a great video. So it's a balancing act. And again, it's going to be, you can't meet this 100%. It's just not possible. So you're going to have to do the best you can. And yeah, that's really frustrating because I like being said, here's the goalpost and this is where you need to get to. It's just, unfortunately, I don't think there is a solid goalpost for this. So, yeah. Anything else?
Well, thank you so much, Mariette, Colleen, and Renee. I appreciate it. Thank you also to everyone for attending and participating today. Our next and final virtual session, The Rough Guide to Citizen Engagement in Public Libraries, begins at 2:30 p.m. Enjoy your lunch break. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good one. We're going to head out.